Okay, so today's lesson we're going to use trig ratios to find an angle. So to make sure this doesn't move here, let me add some tape there, okay? So we're going to find a missing angle using trig ratios. Remember, we have to remember the poem, right? Some old hippie caught another hippie tripping on acid, right? So our first triangle here is we're going to isolate the missing angle. So we're going to get x or the question mark by itself, right? We're going to get the x or the question mark by itself, right? Triangle number 2 is we're going to move sine, cosine, or tangent to the right of the line of separation, and I will demonstrate that in a second. And triangle number 3, when moved, they become what's called inverse, right? It's the math term for the opposite. So when you think of inverse, think of the opposite. The inverse of multiplying is dividing, and the inverse of adding is subtracting. So the inverse of sine is sine inverse, sine -1. The inverse of cosine is cosine inverse, cosine -1. And the inverse of tangent is tangent inverse, tangent -1. So let me make this a little darker here. This marker works here. There we go. All right. A little darker here like this. All right. And here is our right angle. So we have 15 here, 6 here, and question mark here. Right? So it says find the measure of the angle indicated to the nearest degree. So this is the angle we're looking for right there. Right? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to find the hypotenuse. But in this case, there is no hypotenuse, so we're not going to deal with h. Second, we always find is adjacent. Adjacent. What side is right next to the reference angle? And that's 6 here. So that's our A. That's our adjacent. So that means that 15 is the opposite. So we have 6 and 15. So we think what line of the poem has an O and an A, and it's tangent, right? Tripping on acid. Tripping on acid, right? So we know that it's tangent of question mark, that's what we're looking for, is equal to the opposite O, 15, over the adjacent, which is 6. Right? So, in order for us to get the question mark by itself here, I have to cross out tangent. But like I said, when tangent goes over to the other side, it becomes the inverse. Now, only tangent going over, not both. Now, when it's finding the missing side, we're using trig ratios finding the missing side, they both go over. But in this case, only tangent going over. The question mark is staying. So tangent becomes tangent inverse of 15 divided by 6. So use your scientific calculator, and we say tangent inverse of 15 divided by 6, and we get 68.19. Now in this case, in this situation here, in the notes, it says find to the nearest degree. So if we get 68.1, we get 68.1. That means that the 8 is what we're going to round. But the 1 tells the 8 what to do. So since it's less than 5, the answer is 68. The 8 stays the same, degrees. Now, it's important that it's degrees because we're finding a missing angle. And angles are degrees. Okay, second example here. Let's make this triangle a little darker here. Sorry if my head was in the way. Let's make this a little darker, just like that. Here's the right angle, and here's the missing angle. So we're going to circle the missing angle here. Step one, you always find the hypotenuse, which in this case, we do have a hypotenuse. Step two is we find the adjacent, which is the side next to your reference angle, which in this case, it's 10. So the hypotenuse was 23, the adjacent was 10. And we don't need the opposite, which we don't have an opposite anyway, but we don't need it, right? So we think to ourselves, what line of the poem has an H and an A in it? And it's cosine, caught another hippie, caught another hippie. So that means that the cosine of the question mark is equal to a adjacent over hypotenuse, which is 23. So again, our goal is to get the question mark by itself. So I'm going to cross out cosine, and it becomes inverse cosine of 10 divided by 23. So you take your calculator and you say, what is the cosine inverse of 10 divided by 23? And you get 64.2. 64.2. Now, in this case, remember, it's to the nearest degree. So 4 is our nearest degree. The 2 is going to tell the 4 what to do. And since it's less than 5, it's going to tell it to stay. So we get 64 degrees. There we go. That is our solution, and those are our notes for find an angle. Now these notes will be on Schoology as well. A picture will be on Schoology, and you can use it for homework or any help that you need. Next, we're going to do a couple of examples of what the work looks like on Delta Math. Okay, so on Delta Math, the assignment looks like so. In triangle EFG, so EFG, the measure of G is 90, right? There's the right angle. From E to F is 38. From F to G is 30. Find the measure of angle F, right? To the nearest degree. Now in this case, it doesn't use a question mark, it uses an X. But the idea is the same. So we circle our reference angle. Step one is we find our hypotenuse, which is 38. Step two, we find our adjacent, which is the side next to the reference angle, and that's 30. And that's all we need. We don't need opposite, and we don't have an opposite, so we don't worry about that. Okay? So next we think of which line of the poem has an A and an H in it, and we remember that it's caught another hippie. So we remember that it's cosine of x is equal to adjacent, which is 30, over the hypotenuse, which is 38. So we draw our line of separation here. We do x is equal to, so we need to get x by itself, so we're going to cross out cosine, and cosine comes over as cosine inverse of 30 divided by 38. So we say with the calculator, or use the calculator in Delta Math, cosine inverse of 30 divided by 38 is equal to 37.8. Now to the nearest degree, 37.8. So this is to the nearest degree, right before the decimal. That means the 8 is going to tell the 7 what to do. So since it's bigger than 5, the 7 is going to go up to 8. So x will equal 38 degrees. That's what that looks like. Okay. Now, in the second example, we're going to read, let's move it up a little bit here. Okay, in triangle PQR, the measurement of angle R is 90. From R to P is 9.9. From Q to R is 3.2. Find the measure of angle P to the nearest tenth of a degree. So now we're going to round to the tenths place. So let's start here by circling our reference angle, which is x. Okay. Step 1 is we find the hypotenuse. In this case, there is no hypotenuse, so you don't have to worry about that. Okay. Step 2 is we find the adjacent. 9.9 is right next to the reference angle, so that is our adjacent. And that means that 3.2 is across the reference angle, which is the opposite. Right? So, which line of our poems has O and A in it? It's tangent, right? Tripping on acid, right? So we say T stands for tangent of x, right? Is equal to the opposite, 3.2, over the adjacent, which is 9.9. So our goal is to get x by itself. So we are going to move only tangent, not x, tangent over, and it becomes tangent inverse. And we get of 3.2 over 9.9. So we take our calculator and we say tangent inverse of 3.2 divided by 9.9 is equal to 17.91. So we get 17.91. Now I did an extra number here as opposed to the top example because it says to the nearest tenth. So this is my 10th place. And this 1 is going to tell the 9 what to do. So since it's less than 5, it's going to tell the 9 to stay. So x is equal to 17.9 degrees because we're looking for an angle, right? We're looking for an angle. So the answer is 17.9 degrees. And that's what these look like here, both of them. Those are examples on Delta Math on using trig ratios to find an angle.